Lord Bartholomew Goodfellow, or Lord Bart, as he preferred to be called, sat alone in his grand Kensington manor, staring at his foggy garden. Battling with grief and dementia, he was a shadow of the proud man he once was. The halls of his lavish home were silent now, save for the ticking of an old grandfather clock. Lord Bart had always been arrogant, indifferent to the struggles of others, and steeped in privilege. Even now, age and illness have failed to humble him. His only companion was George, his loyal butler of 40 years, who now cared for him as much as he served him. George, ever patient, helped him navigate his days, even during episodes when Lord Bart wandered off or confused the present with the past. One rainy afternoon, Lord Bart and George drove through London. At a red light, a small, shabby antique store caught Lord Bart's attention as he was an avid collector of rare pieces. He ordered George to stop, insisting on going in alone. Inside, the shopkeeper, a tall older woman with unnervingly pale skin and eyes that seemed too dark for her face, greeted him from behind the counter, but Lord Bart ignored her. The shop was cluttered with antiques, but nothing seemed to catch his fancy, until he saw one item. In the far corner of the shop, half hidden behind a pile of old books, was a picture frame. It was simple, with a tarnished silver edge, but inside the frame was a portrait of a young woman. She was beautiful, her dark hair swept back, her eyes soft and kind. She looked familiar, too familiar. Lord Bart's breath caught in his throat. He stepped closer, his hands trembling as he reached for the frame. The woman in the picture, it couldn't be. But it was. It was her. Agatha, he whispered, his voice barely audible. It was Agatha, the only woman he had ever loved. Decades ago, Agatha had been his light, a warm contrast to his cold aristocratic world. They fell deeply in love, and their engagement promised a brighter future. But the night before their wedding, a tragic car accident took Agatha's life. Lord Bart was shattered and retreated into isolation, clinging to his antiques as a distraction from his grief. Now, staring at her portrait, emotions overwhelmed him. He demanded to buy it, ignoring the shopkeeper's eerie remark that he'd already paid in ways he couldn't imagine. Clutching the picture tightly, he threw a wad of cash on the counter and left the shop, his heart heavy with memories of a love that had shaped his life and his loneliness. That night, Lord Bart lay in his bed, the picture frame resting on the table beside him. He stared at it for hours, memories of Agatha filling his mind. He thought of her laugh, her soft eyes, and the way they used to dance under the stars. They had dreamed of a future together, but that dream had slipped away long ago. Eventually, his tired body gave in, and he fell asleep. When he woke the next morning, something felt different. The room seemed brighter, more vivid, and he felt better than he had felt in decades. Rushing to the mirror, he saw his reflection, not as an old man, but as he had been in his youth. Overcome with shock, Lord Bart hurried downstairs, calling for George. But it wasn't George who greeted him in the kitchen. It was Agatha. She stood at the stove, her dark hair tied back just as he remembered. She greeted him with a warm smile. Lord Bart could hardly speak as the sound of her laughter brought tears to his eyes. The day was a dream come true. They walked in the gardens, reminisced about their happiest times and talked about their future. And at night, they shared a quiet candlelight dinner. For the first time in decades, Lord Bart felt whole. When they went to bed, he slept peacefully, dreaming of the future they'd once lost. But when he awoke, he was old again, and Agatha was gone. The grief was unbearable, and George had to calm him down as he spiraled into despair. Each night after that, the dreams returned. Lord Bart would fall asleep staring at the picture frame, and he would wake young, with Agatha by his side. But every morning, she would disappear, leaving him lost and broken. Still, Lord Bart couldn't resist. He longed for the nights when he could be with her again. One morning, he woke to find the shopkeeper standing at the foot of his bed. Her dark eyes glinted in the low light. "You want her, don't you?" she asked, her voice a whisper. "You can have her forever, but there's a price. A life must be given," she said. "A sacrifice. Then you'll never have to wake up alone again." Lord Bart's stomach turned, and his heart pounded. "A life? Whose life?" he asked. She smiled, sharp and cruel. "Your butler, George. His life for your happiness." For the next couple of days, Lord Bart thought about the shopkeeper's offer. The idea horrified him. But as the dreams pulled him deeper into their embrace, the temptation grew. He thought of Agatha's smile, her touch, the way she made him feel alive. Slowly, the cost began to feel worth it. George noticed Lord Bart's strange behavior. He seemed obsessed with an empty picture frame, talking to himself and muttering about sacrifices. George thought it was just the old man's mind failing, but soon he realized something darker was at work. He stayed close, trying to protect his employer, even as Lord Bart's paranoia grew. One fateful night, it happened. Lord Bart crept into the kitchen, where George was making tea. With trembling hands, he raised a knife. Then, without warning, he struck. George turned just in time to see the desperation in Lord Bart's eyes. In his final moments, George's thoughts weren't of betrayal or anger. Instead, they were of pity. He had cared for Lord Bart for so many years, had watched him fall apart piece by piece, and now, in this moment of horror, he saw only a man who had been broken by grief and madness. George had given his life to serving Lord Bart, and in the end, it had cost him everything. Afterwards, Lord Bart returned to his room. He laid down, staring at the picture frame with a smile on his face, and fell into a deep sleep. That night, he dreamed of Agatha. They danced into the night, her eyes twinkling like the stars above. He dreamed of a life full of love and laughter. This is where he belonged. In the embrace of his one true love, Agatha. He surrendered to the dream and he never woke up again.